We are live on air, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome to the September 2nd workshop for the Auburn School Committee. We are here this evening in workshop to have a conversation around the evaluation of the superintendent process. This has come up to us simply because it's time to update the policy. We have a new superintendent on board now, and we want to make sure that we are using tools that are reflective of her performance. So that being said, you have Michelle McClellan has just gone around and given us a packet, and as well as some information was in your onboarding packet as well for this evening. So, and tonight on our agenda is to make some motions about some of these policies. So we want to make sure that we thoroughly understand the policies we are going to be voting on tonight. So with all of that being said, Michelle, I will toss it to you.
Okay, so from what I understand tonight is as an opportunity for you to ask questions about the policies that were in your packet that are up for first reading and approval for policies and the procedure for the approval. So that will be done later on your agenda, but this will give you an opportunity to ask questions about those policies and more importantly, or as importantly, the procedure for evaluating the superintendent. Also tonight, it's an opportunity to talk about the process a little bit more, and what you don't see is the tools that go along with the policies that are specifically around the evaluation of the superintendent and that process. I think it's important for you all to talk about the process, to determine what you want that process to look like in discussion with your superintendent, Dr. Brown, and to determine some things. What tools will be helpful to you in that process? What's the timeline that you think should be followed to make it a meaningful process but allow you the time you need to give meaningful feedback and evaluation? And then perhaps some information that you think will be helpful for your superintendent, clear, constructive feedback, direction as constructive and actionable as that person moves forward, as Dr. Brown moves forward with the information that she receives from the evaluation process. So I want to start off with that. First of all, I can just give you just really quick update on these policies that we're looking at tonight that pertain to it. Policy CB, which is the school superintendent, there really were no changes. It was just a matter of updating. This follows pretty much straight from the description of what, the general description of what a school superintendent is from the statute. Followed by that is the procedure that goes with that policy CBR, which is the job description. And that's where it fleshes out a little bit more. The committee, and I invite Mr. Carrier and Mr. Poisson to jump in, and Dr. Brown, you were at that meeting as well. Karen, were you not at the, okay, I couldn't remember. So
I looked up, I knew there was a pause. I'm thinking, you're trying to think if I was, no.
Couldn't remember, thank you.
Yep.
So the job description on this, there was quite a bit of change. If you look back at the original procedure as it was written, it was just the formatting was rather confusing. So the committee spent some time, the subcommittee spent some time looking at the formatting, trying to look at how we could make that a little more clear, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then we went through, once we got the formatting, did some editing. There was quite a bit of need for editing, that punctuation and grammatical alignment, in that we reduced some redundancies. So we went from a 6-page procedure to a 3-page procedure because from what we could see, the last 3 pages were pretty much restating in another format what was in the first 3 pages. So you could, that's why we wanted you to see the markups, the draft work that we did on that policy, so it would be hopefully a little clearer on what work we accomplished there in our recommendation for this procedure. We worked on clarity of language. really trying to be mindful of not being too specific. Looked at the MSMA example policy in this area and found that it was rather specific, would you say?
Yes, they got off in the weeds quite a bit, and we're trying to keep it more general, and that way we don't want to step off into anything that's really not within our venue. And so we kept it a little bit more out of the weeds, and just basically to clarify it for us.
And then there were a couple of additions, and you can see those there in the red. So that's CBR. And I'll come back through these, but just to give you an overview. And then CBI is the evaluation. Again, there were minimal changes on that that you can see. And I believe there's one more, and I'm not seeing it. CBIR, and again, there were minimal changes on that. So let's go back through, and let me open it up to you now, questions that you have as you read through these.
So I guess one of the questions I have is that I'm looking at, oh, I just lost it. In here, we're talking about, I'm on policy CB-R, the evaluation. So performance shall be evaluated annually in accordance with the school committee's policy on evaluation of the superintendent. So if this is stated here that our policy is annually, but I believe in your contract, Dr. Brown, it says quarterly. So how do we look at the difference between those two things?
So I believe my contract says that the school committee will provide one written evaluation per year, and
Okay.
that I will meet quarterly for the formal purpose of reviewing my evaluation. I'm going to just slide this way so I'm not bending over the table.
Okay.
Which is coming right up, by the way. Chairman Matthew and I tentatively set the 16th of September for that first quarterly review, because believe it or not, it's been a whole quarter by the 16th.
Time flies. Okay.
We're not having fun.
I didn't finish the sentence. Okay, so that was one of the questions that I had. Any other questions, comments, things you're thinking about? I think one of the things that might be helpful too is also making sure that we have an understanding of the timeline that goes along with these evaluation procedures.
Move on with that. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to make sure that people, I think the CB is probably pretty straightforward, no questions on that. Chair Matthew, you had a question about CBR. Was there anybody else who needed clarification on what was done in that document? Okay. CBI, getting into the evaluation, and the CBIR with the procedures around that. Okay. So in your packet that I just handed out prior to the meeting, these are also in the policy manual. The subcommittee chose not to spend a lot of time with this. This is where I think, is the opportunity for you as a school committee to have a conversation about what tools you will find helpful to this process and the timeline. As Chair Matthew just pointed out, it's the last page in that packet, CBIE 3. So these are just evidences in the, yes, that right there, Dave. These are evidences that are in the policy manual that just show the public, really, and you use to evaluate. And I think it was the intention of the subcommittee to not assume that these are the tools that you want to use, but rather to review the process first and then say, what tools do we think we would find most helpful? So would you like to start with the timeline first? Is that what you're proposing?
Is this all in statute? Did you say that?
No, this is in the policy your policy manual here.
Policy,
Yeah, local.
This was the
same one as before, right? This is the same one we had for the previous.
Yes, this is currently in your policy manual, is what's been used up to this point.
I'd say provided that we, this timeline will be, I can say this, I don't know that any adjustments need to be made to this timeline. However, this, whatever we decide for a timeline tonight will be strictly adhered to.
One of the things we had talked about too with if you look at number 9 on the list, the superintendent completes an evaluation of the school committee. It's not like she's evaluating us. What that basically is she's telling us, things that she thinks that she needs to get from us. It's not like, basically like her evaluating us like we do her. It's just, she needs to be able to talk with us and see what else that, things that she needs, and she needs to be able to communicate that to us and tell us, where we need to support her more or where, we need to back off a little bit.
So CBI, there was a change made to the wording right around that, just
Yes.
as you're saying, Mr. Courier. It's CBIH, superintendent should have the opportunity to provide feedback to the school committee. Feedback may include an examination of the working relationship between the school committee and the superintendent. So I think you're right, Brian, that language should align if we are going to stay with this timeline as it is.
Any questions, school committee members? Any need for making any adjustments to this timeline as you look through it? Does it look like it sort of flows from a beginning to end, and then be able to offer Dr. Brown some timely feedback?
Yeah,
Brian?
one of the steps that looks like that I might recommend or potentially might be missing is, so I see the superintendent does a self-evaluation, superintendent and school committee meet to discuss, the individual committee members do their evaluation, but it seems like there should be a step between 6 and 7 where all the members get back together. And one of the things that we did in the last evaluation, which is the only one that I've ever done, we had a pretty good group consensus of trying to relay all the results and have discussion around, what somebody might be thinking. Somebody might have filled out their evaluation, added a comment, but then it was kind of more discussed as a group just to see if others had more feedback, if it stirred other comments, or there was kind of a group discussion without the superintendent, kind of like prior to the chair or the subcommittee building the actual draft of the evaluation to then bring back. It was like kind of a discussion point.
I think that's an excellent point. I do remember that. Remember that
Remember
step.
that where we sat down and we just went over everything. We just kind of discussed everybody filled it out, sent it in, and then we kind of came together and I think we actually had a subcommittee where we took everybody's info and we kind of got a bunch of the themes and kind of got it down to taking everybody's information, and then we went through each goal in that discussion. It was kind of just got people's feedback. Do people agree with it, disagree with it? Was it one person's opinion? And kind of just had a group discussion before.
Did you come to consensus during that process?
Yep, consensus of like, okay, these are the 3 comments that we think most reflect this goal, and this is what we want to put forward. So I thought that was kind of just a good process.
I think it was helpful. You're jogging my memory now.
Well, it saves from, in this case, Karen having to try to put all that information together and come up with her own evaluation and then review it. It's kind of like you cut out one of those steps.
And being able to talk about and elaborate on what we wrote on paper and explain it more, because, you're limited to how many words you can, and then other people would piggyback on that. And it was nice to see that a lot of people had the same opinions, then people differed, but then we talked about it and just, decide which points we wanted to highlight on the evaluation. So I definitely think, because we all know we don't have, a lot of time to discuss as a group, and it's such a important evaluation that I think I agree with Brian that it was very helpful, and we actually did come to an agreement and all.
Helped with wordsmithing too, kind of wordsmithing some of the, 5 people had the same comment, and you could kind of look at it and go, how do we best wordsmith this so that the message is received in a maybe it's in a constructive manner, maybe it's in a, and maybe it's in a positive manner, but how do you wordsmith it so it it gets everybody's ideas together.
Okay, so I mean, I would support that, only because we've walked through the process, and it did clarify some things that I questioned when I read them. So I'm wondering, Michelle, lead me through. So if we are asking for something to be put in between numbers 6 and 7,
I jotted something down to at least begin with, committee meets to discuss the results, because it's coming after people are doing their individual pieces, and to reach consensus around the evaluation. Around,
let's see, let's use some of the same wording, maybe that's up above.
around, not goals, around performance.
You could do the committee members discuss the evaluation that was sent to the chair or something like that.
Yep,
Performance.
yep. I do know I would really like that added in. All right, anything else that we're noticing? That was a great point. Thank you, Brian.
One of the other things, Karen, and so we go from, we're gonna get together and discuss the evaluation, then, all the pieces, then whether it's the chair, subcommittee, however you want to do that, drafts kind of the evaluation. We also had another step after, which was, okay, now that the evaluation is formal, before we go in and present it to the superintendent, let's make sure that there's nothing missing.
Okay.
Kind of another step, like, we get everybody's feedback written, we go over the feedback, and then we put the feedback into a kind of a formal, here's what's going to be presented to the superintendent, and make sure everybody has, so that way there's no surprises.
So the step between 7 and 8 as well? Okay, all right. Did you catch that one?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So Michelle, that was, the individual committee members, they submit their feedback. Then we meet as a group and just kind of discuss that feedback and kind of come to some consensus on the items that we want to reflect on. Then we do the actual evaluation, which is putting all that data into the actual form. And then what we did was review it one more time, kind of review what is going to be presented to the superintendent. So that way everybody knew that they were, even though we had a consensus on the items, it was more on the formal language after.
Thank you.
That way there was no surprises.
So that was between 7 and 8.
7, 8, yeah.
Yep.
So it's almost like a review and approve of the final evaluation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Which I think makes sense. It's another safety net there that we all have eyes on it, because I'd like to think I have some integrity, but what I write could be completely not what we discussed. So I would appreciate that as a consensus. Okay, thank you, Brian. Anything else on this timeline that seems that we need to add something, or?
Does the timeline seem adequate? We've spent time going down the side, across the top.
So I think the timing makes sense as well. These are based on 4-week months.
This is for the actual formal.
It is.
Should we have in the timeline the quarterly kind of like, I'll call it catch up? Like it's kind of like the thing that Dr. Brown was talking about in her contract. Like we have one written annually, but we also have 4 that are more like a kind of a check and adjust, or a check-in, or it's kind of like an informal evaluation.
We also use those check-ins in the end to help formulate the evaluation as well, because then that's going to kind of, things that we may have forgotten, but we've been checking in.
You have in, I'm looking now, flipping paper madly, in the process, CBIR, in, let's see, Section 2, Employment Goals, B. The committee and superintendent shall meet in executive session. Oh, I'm looking at the draft, excuse me, apologize. Well, I'm not sure where my other one is. It talks about mid-year. for the purpose of reviewing. So right now you have that mid-year. So you'll need to decide if you want to do that more
So it's in
frequently
here
in
mid-
policy, in procedure, or if that's something in contract.
But I would like to, I'd like for right now, for this language right now, for the policy right now, to reflect what the contract is stating as well. I think that's where I'm a little bit hung up right now.
So I don't see that in conflict.
Okay.
Is it
You have to do it in policy at least
once a year?
in the
Okay.
mid-year point.
I think it's
It
a-
doesn't restrict you from doing it more frequently.
Okay.
I think if it were the other way around, you might,
We would want that stated. Okay.
so that's something you can decide. what you want to do.
Okay. All right, so if the timeline looks okay for everyone at this point, we'll make those adjustments to the timeline.
Yes, I have those.
Okay,
Great.
and then the tools, is that what we're looking at next?
Sure. So what you have is two tools as part of the process. One is the, E1 is what you would use as committee members to, where is my, let me get my timeline so I can tie it back in here. That piece that is number 6 on the timeline, individual committee members complete the evaluation form, okay? So this goes with that step number 6. This is the tool that you would be using to reflect on and provide feedback on, and subsequently the rating of the goals of the superintendent. Okay, and then E2 is the form that would be used by others to rate. And I'm trying to see where it is. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the font. We're going to enlarge this a little bit.
Thank you.
Here. I'm sure there's a place where it says you gather information from other people. This is the tool that that they would be using to fill out and then send to the chair. And that's how the information is gathered right now. Those are the two tools that you have.
All right. These tools seem, what are we thinking on these tools? Brian?
Yeah, I think these are the same tools we used. I think the evaluation of the superintendent rating form, CBIE2 is, is a good template. I mean, I think in the last time we ended up getting, emails and Word docs and other stuff that still represented the same information. So I think that was, it's a good template for that. The other one, CBIE one, the whole 1 through 4 is always tough. I think it was a good template to follow, if I remember right, when we were kind of walking through, because we were able to, put all the comments and suggestions in there, the supporting indicators. It was easy to review each goal. But the rating is always going to be tough anyway.
The rating it will
There's
be.
so,
right.
like a 2 is very discrete, and there's, it's such a discrepancy between a 1 versus a 2 versus a 3 versus a 4.
Welcome to the world of grading.
Yeah. We used a lot of, if I remember right, Karen, we used a lot of halves, like
We
2.5,
did.
3.5.
We did use
Like,
halves.
We ended up using kind of a modified rated version.
Yeah,
We did halves.
always.
But I think in the end, it really was surprising how, if I remember correctly, we were all pretty close to, I think we were pretty close.
Well, and that's why that meeting to discuss is very important.
So
because
critical.
if you're a 2 and I'm a 4, well, why?
Right, yeah.
If we're both a 3, well, then what are our supporting indicators to support it? But it just opens up a great discussion. You shouldn't have, realistically, you shouldn't have that big of a disparity. You shouldn't have somebody had a 1 and a 4.
Right.
They should be really close. But again, I think, it was just a great forum to be able to walk through, gather everybody's feedback on one, and then go back and actually do a more formal document after the fact. So the templates kind of lend themselves nicely to the process.
Dr. Brown, I'm curious, you have been through superintendent evaluations before. When you look at this tool, do you find that this is a tool that will provide you, or these steps that will provide you with the feedback that you would be looking for?
I was just looking at the tie between the job description and the form and making sure that it's pretty tight. And what I didn't see, and maybe I missed it first time through, was the sort of the leadership piece. I didn't find that there. And that seems to be, I mean, that's usually pretty prominent for a superintendent, and it is in the job description. So if somebody could point that out to me, I'd be appreciative. The second thing that would seem to bear for me some discussion is that one of the questions on the evaluation pertains to, this is long-range planning, and it says oversees the development and implementation of a district mission and vision. So if that's something you have, how would the superintendent move that forward in a meaningful way?
If it's already in place, so Vision
It's
2030 is already in place.
Right.
So if we were to stay with that element, you would probably want to add /or, so and/or.
That's what I was just thinking.
The leadership, it's not to the degree that, I don't know that anyone would say is in balance with the amount of time or expectation around leadership, and it's right under that on long-range planning in number 2. It talks about the long-range planning in terms of, in the areas of leadership, but that's as close as I can see that leadership is even referenced in this particular document.
And I'm looking at the job description, or the proposed job description, which is on page 2, which really I think is quite powerful. The ability to lead, the ability to inspire, motivate, guide, direct, et cetera, and the capacity to influence, enhance, and sustain vision, direction, and progress seems to me to be a lot more powerful than what's on page 1, 2, let's see here.
2?
Page 3 on this document.
Yes.
I would agree,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so how would we incorporate that or change the wording so that it reflects what is expected in the job description? Mr. Simpson, you got any thoughts rolling around right now?
Thought might be particularly that second bullet on CBR leadership. You might want to look at that.
Yeah, it seems like it should be added either as a replacement of number 1, merged with number 1, or as a new number,
On its
number
own?
2, like keep long-range planning and add leadership as another one in between. But I agree with Dr. Brown. Those two bullet points out of the job description should be pretty clear in this, I think.
So in the end, we want to make sure this is a tool that is helpful for you, because feedback that's not helpful is just meaningless. So we want to make sure it's absolutely meaningful for you. So what would your recommendation be then, Brian, on that one?
Probably to add a yeah, I think it's more powerful than the long-range planning is probably good to keep that in sight, as to maybe not the actual you know, obviously, like you said, with the 2030, it's kind of, there needs to be more of a, it's more of the implementation of the plan, of the vision than it is the direct development of it right now.
We can all have great vision, but it's the implementation of that vision, right?
You know, and then, again, I think the leader, you know, and that could probably even be under the leadership. It could be a leadership category there with that as part of that maybe, versus having it as long-range planning.
Okay.
Long-range planning be part of the implementation of the mission and vision? Is that what you're saying? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I was just, I was thinking changing number 1
Yeah,
to, instead of long-range planning, change it to the leadership. Add a couple bullets for the 2 really nice items in the job description, and then incorporate, maybe it's more of like we were talking about, maybe it's more of the implementation of the vision versus the actual development of it right now.
Anyone have any thoughts on that? Agree, disagree? I agree. You agree with that? Okay. All right. Michelle, do you have that chicken scratch
I think
noted?
so. I will run it by a couple of you.
Okay.
Make sure I do.
So if I might, Madam Chair, I think what is as valuable to me is would be the comments that people provide, less so than the categories. And possibly even more so than the ratings, because I think that sometimes overshadows the feeling behind those marks. And so that's where the real value is to me. And you had asked about my experience with evaluations over the years. The most meaningful are the ones where the committee takes the time to cite examples of things that have gone well or examples of things that need improvement. And that gives me a guiding light about where I need to go next. So that's the most helpful. Sometimes a narrative or a paragraph is more helpful than a score, because that gives me something that I can gain something from. And to your point, it's pretty hard if it's a 2.5 or a 3.5, what that really means. I'd rather have a dialogue with people to understand where they're coming from.
Duly noted, and we were able to provide that on each one of these tools right now. So comments and suggestions are on there right now.
One of the other things I know again, we used this CBIE one as a template when we did the last one last year. One of the things I think we found that was, well, one, we actually kind of created our own document, if you remember right, which, just because there wasn't enough space in one of these documents to really make it a narrative. But the whole supporting indicators versus comments and suggestions, they ended up becoming one and the same, because your supporting indicators are naturally going to be your comments. This is what went well, this is what didn't go well. It's that narrative, and again, I think that is more of a precedence than, like you said, Dr. Brown, the rating. The rating is something you have to do, but it's really that comments, suggestions, why we have the 2 different blocks there. I'd almost merge them into one, and it'd be, here's the rating and here's the comments, suggestions, supporting indicators. It's the narrative of why you're giving that rating versus trying to separate them out. Because again, what we found is we were putting the same comments in both just to satisfy the template.
Just to put something in there? Oh, I can do that.
So I think, like I said, just, you could almost merge it into just one, and it becomes just the explanation for the rating.
Any other comments on that? How's the rest of the committee feeling on that piece? Did you notice redundancy when you were doing them last year? Deanna and Faith, did you notice some overlap in that as well? A little bit?
You're trying to overthink because I got to put something in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think it also forces you to, if there's 2, you end up, like you said, you're almost like, okay, I got to put something in there, or, oh, there's only one bullet, so I got to put 2 bullets in there. Whereas if you have that one box, here's your narrative for that, regardless if it's 2 sentences or 5 pages, here's the narrative.
Because your supporting indicators for why you're making those comments should come right through as you're making the comments.
Absolutely, you should be able to
Okay.
read it, and you should know exactly what the supporting indicators are, what the comments are, what the suggestions are, what went well, what didn't go well. You should get that from a narrative versus,
Yep. Yep, okay.
indicators.
All right, makes sense to me. We get that one too?
Yeah.
Also keeps it simple.
Yeah. Let's do it. All right, anything else we need to go through on these policies and procedures, I should say? Did we miss anything? Any other questions, comments, sarcastic remarks? Dr. Brown, are you feeling the way, if some of these are tightened up, that this would be, were the comments made tonight, that this would be a tool that would support your work here?
I think so. You know, until you go through the process, it's hard to speculate on exactly how helpful it will be. I think I've been pretty clear all along. An evaluation, well, maybe I haven't been, an evaluation should not be a surprise. So when I meet with the committee, if there are things that they would like to bring to my attention, I'm hoping that they don't wait until that process to do that. That would be my caveat with this process at this point.
Thank you. Sorry, Michelle, did I interrupt something you were going to say?
No, what I was going to say was, we'll go ahead tonight, and, you know, you see the first reading of the policies on the agenda, and then the approval of our procedures, and then we'll work in our subcommittee to make sure that the changes are made to the 2 pieces of evidences that are accompanying the CBI, and then we'll bring those back at another time in the future.
Okay. Anything else, school committee members? All right, we're going to take a workshop. I'm calling workshop to an end, and we are going to take 15 minutes before we have our 7 o'clock meeting tonight. Thank you.
Anyone would like a copy of the remote learning plan? I know you're getting questions about it, and you approved it earlier, but I have copies if you'd like a printed copy, just to remind you of the remote learning plan. Oh, I have one. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 2nd meeting of the Auburn School Committee. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's begin with introductions. I'll switch it up. I'll go down here to my left, so that's you, Mr. Carrier, first.
Brian Carrier, Mayor's Representative.
Voice on Ward 5.
Faith Fontaine at large.
Connie Brown, Superintendent of Schools.
Karen Matthew, Ward 3.
Pam Hart, Ward 2.
Brian Belknap, Ward 4.
David Simpson at large.
All right, thank you, everyone. Let's move on to the consent agenda. Can I entertain a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, which includes the minutes from August 19th and the certificated nominations below? Is it okay to publicly state what you also just told me? So, ladies and gentlemen of the school committee, the third name on the bottom has, we are not approving this evening. It is the first two, Michelle Breton for guidance at Park Ave, as well as Angela Moore in grade 6 over at Fairview. Can I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Faith. Can I have a second? Thank you, Brian Belknap. All those in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion passes. Thank you. All right, I'd like to offer a warm welcome to Michelle and Angela on behalf of the Auburn School Committee. Welcome to the Auburn School Department. All right, moving on, public participation. Public participation this evening is for citizens to comment on general topics related to the school system during this portion of the agenda. I don't believe we have anyone. We have no one visiting us this evening. No one visiting. All right, moving on from public participation, let's move on to the superintendent's report, which is the opening of schools and work that has been done around the opening of schools. Dr. Brown.
Well, thank you very much. And part of this will be to talk about fall sports, so I'll circle back to that in a minute. Just a couple of quick FYIs. We are looking to open on the 14th with 3,551 kids. That's roughly 100 more students than we had about this time last year. Last night, I shared with the council some of our staffing needs, and these are changing literally day by day. But as of today, we are looking for 4 classroom teachers, 14 ed techs, a bus driver, 2 custodians, a nurse, and 2 speech pathologists. I didn't include in this list the things like classroom substitutes, long-term subs, bus aides, substitute custodians, and we nearly always need those positions as well. It's a tough time to be recruiting and finding staff at this point in the year. So we're still working hard, and Mr. Fairchild is one of the people who is most impacted by these vacancies. A number of these are special education positions, including speech language pathologists, that are hard to find in a good year. So wish us luck as we try to go forward with that. Just a couple of quick other things. We are finalizing bus routes. Today, the robocalls went out to kids and families telling them who their classroom teachers would be, what they have for schedules, so those have been made. We are doing our best to accommodate changes if people have been given a cohort and they need to move because of family circumstances, and we'll do our best to make that happen. Adam, you and Billy are working on bus routes as we speak. And do you want to say just a little bit about the school nutrition program? And just to kind of set that up for Adam, we found out, what's today, Wednesday, Monday, that there would be a waiver from the Agricultural Commissioner, Sonny Perdue, who will allow all students to continue to receive meals through December 31st. That was a change. We thought we would have to go back to the application process that you are probably familiar with. At the beginning of the year, we asked families to identify whether they may be able to receive meals. But Adam, what have I left out?
Yeah, we were very pleased to see the waiver. It's like with a lot of these things, it's hard that it came through literally on the last day. But we're very pleased. It's great for our families, and it's also great for our program to have this continuing on. It greatly simplifies it, and hopefully will increase our participation and the reimbursement that comes along with it. So our nutrition director, Chris Piercy, has a webinar with the Maine DOE Nutrition Director, Walter Beasley, tomorrow afternoon. And once he's gotten some info from DOE, we're hoping to get out a robocall and information late tomorrow about the nutrition program, the extension of the waiver that everyone can eat for free, and discussing that we are attempting to go with a full delivery model for remote meals on Wednesdays. And so we'll need parents to let us know what they're looking for meals so that we can make that happen. So it's really exciting to see it come together. We're going to give it a shot and look for more information to come out on that, hopefully tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And that concludes my remarks. Shall I ask for the sports piece to come forward?
Yes, please.
Hi, folks. I'm going to just put up a power play just because, more so to keep me on track and keep me focused, as there's been numerous changes over the last couple of days. So just basically to kind of give you an idea of, I've shared with this before, but kind of where are we getting the recommendations that we've been given, and where are we with those recommendations? And I obviously need new contacts because it's a little unclear, so I'll look at my screen. The High School Federation is the national group. The MPA Sports Medicine Committee, Interscholastic Management Committee, and yesterday, some of the announcements that came out, the guidelines for community-based sports really kind of were a game changer yesterday for us. And then obviously, part of the Reentry Health and Safety Committee here in Auburn. So just to give you a little brief history, we've been, our coaches have been with our kids since July 6th in some form. And just to share with you kind of what they've been going through and what their protocols have been to ensure not only the coaches' safety, but our kids' safety, and obviously to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Everyone completes the personal health screen, and that's been a little bit different for everybody. Some coaches are very technologically savvy, and that is done on a Google Doc, and other people through the Federation, it's pen and paper. So it's being done in a variety of ways, but it is being done. Once again, through Adam's help and Billy Hunter, we have plenty of hand sanitizer, masks, gloves that are being given out, and those coaches are kind of meeting the kids as they get out of their cars and doing that. Social distancing, I think this has been the challenge for a lot of our coaches. These kids haven't seen each other all summer or hadn't seen each other, and I'm happy to report that several of the coaches are saying that kids are getting better. And it's just kind of, as Mr. Anir says all the time, the adults role modeling, and we've done a pretty good job with that. The hard piece in athletics, we love to high five and celebrate and fist pump, so we've taken away some of those things. The disinfecting of equipment, and that includes everything. As we got into phase 3 and 4, we started to use a lot of equipment, field hockey sticks, goalie helmets, those kind of things. So we've done a good job of that. And on top of our weight room, we've been using our weight room since we've gotten into phase 4, and we have multiple stations across the weight room with all of these supplies. And then this is kind of leading into our future, but coaches, staff are wearing their face masks while they're doing this training, and kids are wearing their face masks going to the training and leaving, but not while participating. And I just put in spectators, if we're permitted in the fall to have them, are going to have to wear their face mask. And partially through the reentry plan, through Michelle's committee, is we formed the COVID-19 response team and emergency action plans. And I'll talk a little bit about that later in what some of the requirements are from the MPA.
I would just want to hop in here for a second. The coaches have done an incredible job at making sure that all of the conditions were being met every day. Like, they took that to heart and really employed what was being asked of them and what was being asked of the athletes during the summertime. And because of their diligence, I think Sabrina was able to talk about it yesterday a little bit, but for us, when we had a potential scare, it could be investigated very effectively and efficiently. And you know, we made it through with no issues, but it really allowed, because of their diligence to following all the factors and considerations, for us to really be right on top of that. I'd get a phone call from Todd saying, just FYI, this is a potential. And, you know, we followed all of the steps that were outlined, and unfortunately, everything worked out beautifully, but it really enhanced the opportunity for why that contact tracing works so well for them this summer. It was great evidence of that being a very positive experience.
And kudos to our fall coaches. I think this is year 20 of me being an athletic administrator over 3 seasons. I don't think I've ever had perfect attendance at a coaches meeting. We had our fall coaches meeting, perfect attendance. And I joke about it a little bit, but it just speaks to the professionalism of our coaches, that they knew what we were talking about, they knew it was going to be serious, and they made an effort to be there. So one of the requirements or recommendations from the MPA is about an emergency action plan. You've heard me in the past bring our athletic trainer in front of you and how awesome Sarah Poirier is. She already had that work done. So for her, it was just a matter of making some COVID-19 specific adjustments, which have been done. And that's no easy task in Auburn because of our multiple venues. Field hockey's at Shorewood Heights. Soccer is at the high school. Cross country is at AMS, but they also train out on Spring Road. So for us to have those emergency action plans at different locations is a credit to her and the work that she's put in. The pods, you heard cohorts, you hear pods, but we'll carry that on into the fall. So when we start soccer or field hockey, our coaches are still going to be keeping kids in pods while they train. And one of the things you've seen in the past is a varsity and JV field hockey team traveling together or going to a game together. That's probably not going to happen. We're going to try to keep the varsity teams really isolated from the JV teams so that we can take care of limit the exposure and for contact tracing. One of the other things, we're going to limit game day squads. Sometimes coaches really like to have some of our younger kids, our freshmen and sophomores, up with the varsity to experience game day, understand what might be going on in the varsity program. We're really going to try to limit those. You know, if a soccer team needs 11 on the field, maybe we're only bringing 15 or 16 kids to those games. Coaches, Mr. Anier mentioned the accurate records. We did have a couple situations where a student athlete thought they had symptoms, and when we sent them for the COVID test, our coaches had accurate records. We knew who was there and who had been at practice for those days, so we're going to continue that on. Once again, I'll talk about the spectators a little bit down the road, but one of the things that is still in the governor's executive order is the mass gathering, and indoor of 50 people and outdoor of 100 people, and that includes spectators, officials, the chain gang at the football game, ball boys at soccer, Miss Peters keeping the clock at field hockey. All of those people count in that 100, so that's going to be a challenge. We're currently exploring some opportunities for live streaming through the Federation, where they're actually giving some cameras, one for an indoor venue and one for an outdoor venue, so we're exploring that right now. And here's the piece, once again, kudos to our coaches and their professionalism, is we've required our coaches to take a COVID-19 class through the National Federation program. I would tell you, out of the 23 or 24 coaches, I think 20 have already done it. So it's something they've taken seriously. Specific sports, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on golf and cross country because these are really the low-risk activities, and I feel very comfortable that we're going to be able to do these, and the MPA and even the government, state government's going to allow us to do these. I just wanted to give you some examples of the thought that's gone into these. no use of the pro shop, limit the playing field for golf, expand the spacing between tee times so you don't have a group finishing up, putting out, and then going to the next tee box, and now you've got a group of 10 kids together. So they're trying to spread those out. No signing of the scorecard, which is always kind of a tradition in golf. Cross country, we're pretty fortunate at AMS. Our course is pretty wide open, that we don't have that, but there will be a couple of places that we're going to need to widen out a little bit. And Mr. Anier is very good with a chainsaw, so he's going to come help trim up some of those tight spots for us. Here's the face covering is going to be worn by the athletes up to the start line. And then they'll either be able to, if it's a cloth one that they want to keep with them, they'll keep it with them. And we'll have a trash can there for them if it's a disposable one. So those are some things. And once again, we're going to limit those runners, because if you've ever been to a cross-country, there may be 100 or 150 runners. We're going to limit the amount of runners at our events. Moderate risk, and these are two different moderate risk, whether you're looking at the MPA guidelines or the community sport. Field hockey, very similar to some of the things that they're going to do. We'll have separate entrances and exits for teams over at Sherwood Heights. You know, we'll have our Edward Little girls kind of enter from the side street there, where the visiting team will come down over the hill, keep them as much apart as we can. The mouth guards, you'll see this in several sports. There's going to be really a push, more so in the past. Kids need to keep the mouth guards in their mouth. Don't take them out. Don't do the fish hook that they keep it out. They really need to keep it in their mouth and not touch it. Girls volleyball, which we're at a JV level right now. This is one of the sports that yesterday from the Commissioner of Education and DHHS is very concerned because of the fact that girls volleyball is played inside. And there's some real concern about being able to keep your social distance and wearing of masks. But some of the things that we have in place now is, you know, rotating the balls, disinfecting the balls during play, and the officials not touching the balls with their hands. Benches would be extended, similar to what, if you've seen any of the NBA games in the bubble, Taco Fall is sitting in the third row back in the Celtics bench, so you're not right on top of each other. Moderate risk sport, soccer. Once again, our schedule has been completely removed from what it was when we left on March 13th, and we'll do all regional opponents. One of the things we saw in the community sports guideline was really attempting to play within our county or adjacent county in some aspects. I'm going to limit it to a 10-season game. That was the guideline before yesterday, and what I'll show you that we got some more guidance late this afternoon about the start date. So that may be even reduced a little bit further, that we may not play the 10 games. No introductions, pregame introductions or ceremonies, and that once again is just to limit exposure and limit the time that they're there. I have requested one exception and really want to celebrate our seniors. Our senior kids that lost a junior season in the spring, if we can do a senior celebration for them at the first home game, we will have a pregame ceremony for those kiddos. And I shared that with our football parents on Saturday morning, and they were pretty excited about that. Sport specifics, and you know what? This really changes the game of soccer quite a bit with no side tackling and 5 in the box. But talking to our coaches, they want kids to have an opportunity to play. It's going to be different. It's going to look different, but we want them to play. And then once again, spectators will be the issue. Football, it is what it is. Football is high risk. The MPA agrees that it's high risk. The community sports group agrees that it's high risk. There's been things put into place, and the hope is that extending the team box, no use of locker rooms at any point during the season. Kids will be issued equipment. They'll take the equipment home with them. They'll bring it back. It's going to be their responsibility to disinfect it each night. We won't have, obviously the locker room won't be there, and they won't be in those tight quarters. They've extended the team box to go all the way to the 10-yard line so that kids can stand 6 feet apart. Our coaches offensively don't huddle anyways, but they're encouraging no huddles, pregame, halftime, any of those pieces. And for football, they're required that the mouth guard actually be attached to the face mask so that if it does fall, that they can hold the strap and not the mouthpiece that actually goes in the mouth to put it back in. No handshakes, those kind of things. This is kind of the late breaking news, and this has been updated 3 or 4 times over the last couple days. Yesterday, we got word from Commissioner Lambrou and Commissioner Macon, and their letter back to the MPA with some of their concerns. And there were 2 real big pieces. They wanted the MPA to extend the delayed start. We were supposed to start August 17th. We were supposed to start games today. That got pushed back to September 8th, and both Commissioner Lambrou and Macon just felt more comfortable if we could push back the start date, get kids back into school, that would be helpful for everybody. So we got the word today at 3:53 p.m. that fall sports are going to begin on the 14th of September. And our coaches will continue next week working with our student athletes in their summer programming phase 4. And what that is coaches are running programming, many of them 5 days a week, but it is not mandatory for our kiddos right now. It's still summer programming. It will not be a tryout. If a kid can't make it, they can't make it. But we will start the following Monday.
There's still a lot of emphasis on conditioning in Phase 4,
Correct.
which is real important so that we're not just ripping the Band-Aid off a kiddo in terms of preparation for a fall sport. So it extends that Phase 4, but it is still a lot of emphasis on the conditioning and maintaining those factors and considerations and guidelines that they had done throughout the summer in terms of answering the questionnaire, making sure that they're socially distanced, all of the tracking that the coaches did. So those things continue to stay in place.
And a big part of the letter yesterday back to the Maine Principals Association came from concern. The Maine School Superintendents Association was concerned with the sports guidelines. And having further conversations with the Athletic Directors Association today and other athletic administrators, the concern wasn't necessarily with the MPA sports guidelines per se as they were written. The concern was we had 2 governing bodies that weren't meshing up with guidelines. The community sports base that the rec department and some of our AAU teams have been using throughout the summer, and what the MPA guidelines were, just weren't meshing in certain things. That was the superintendent's concern. And then the School Board Association felt that the postponement of fall sports to spring may be the best option. And once again, digging deeper into that recommendation or those thoughts was really about Maine is very different in Fort Fairfield than it is in Kittery. And there were a lot of concerns with a delayed start now that many of our Aroostook County schools that still take a potato harvest, they won't be back in school and they can't have a season. So it wasn't necessarily that they didn't want kids to be participating in athletics, but they wanted to have a fair opportunity for kids across the state. And I just put on there that the community sport, the low risk golf and cross country are in really, really good shape. I think a little bit of tweaking from the MPA back to the DOE, we're going to be in really solid shape with those. The moderate risk, the soccer, field hockey, and girls volleyball, they're going to have to make some changes. They're going to have to do some things differently. And what soccer looked like last fall, it might not look like this year. And then I'm going to be honest with you. Many of you know me. I'm a pretty straight shooter. I'm really concerned about football. I'm concerned. I think we can do it safely. I've seen our football coaches and our kids do the things they need to do to be safe. but I think there's just enough concern with our governing bodies that football may need to look at a different alternative. And ask my opinion, if our football kids can't compete this fall, I would lobby, and Mr. Anier and I talked about this at length today, I would lobby for them to have a season at some other point during the school year, whether that's spring football or something along those lines. Those kids and coaches deserve a season as well. So that's all I have now, and there may be an email in my inbox right now changing everything that I just told you. I hope not. Similar to Dr. Brown, last night I have 57 pages of paper, and I may have missed something, and I'm free to answer any questions, and Mr. Anier is up to speed with all of this as well.
Do you have any questions regarding?
Mind where if this hasn't been resolved, you're going to recommend pulling the plug? Because I think I saw today an RSU did exactly that, I think. I might have been.
No, you're spot on, Dave. I believe it was Hancock County.
Yeah.
I know is very concerned, and we have had several school districts make the decision to not have athletics. I'm certainly not at that point, but we all know as the weather has kind of changed the last 4 or 5 days, fall is coming, and if we continue to push back the start dates, middle of October it gets pretty cold, and
And the loss of sunlight is the other
absolutely.
factor of trying to
We don't have
squeeze
lights
it.
in our soccer or field hockey facility, so that's a big concern. And the other piece is one of the sports we can play is golf. And already when we have state championships in October, middle of October, we have frost delays some days.
Yeah.
So it's a legitimate, that's a very good point that we may need to look at sometime about what is going to be our drop dead date that we may need to.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the kids can have sports.
Thank you.
And if it ever comes to vote to this council, I will vote in favor of it every day. Question for Dr. Brown. Over the last 4 to 6 weeks, we've heard teachers raise great concerns about mixing cohorts. And if we're to resume sports, what is the plan to support stable cohorts for kids attending school and playing sports?
So as Todd has said, the kids are already organized into what you said they're called pods, and they're small. And so if we had a case here and we identified the places that student had been, we would identify the different cohorts or pods that student was in. And that's the way that we would work with the CDC to identify and trace where that student was.
Okay, because it seems like there was great emphasis on Monday, Tuesday. They have to be, we're gonna, I think the term was stable cohort. And now we're going to, which I completely support, but I think I'm representing the concerns that we heard for the last 6 or 8 weeks. We're penetrating those cohorts that seem to be desperately vulnerable to begin with, if you will.
Well, I think
That makes sense.
Well, I think so. I think the analogy that I heard that made some sense to me, it's sort of like safety measures on your car. And so you can use seat belts, or you can use airbags, or you can use auto lane correct, which, by the way, I don't like at all. And you can decide how much of those you want in your vehicle. And so we're doing the best that we can to provide the safest experience in the most reasonable way.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the?
I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So the health screening you talked about.
Put your mic right up to your, yeah, thank you.
So the health screenings you talked about, those were done daily, right, by the students? Also, so while they're playing and they're not 6 feet apart, are they wearing masks? Like in soccer, everybody's wearing a mask?
They will be required to.
Okay. Another thing, too, is you had said something about how emergency plans had changed and they had been adapted to COVID. Can you explain that a little bit more as to what was done?
The two big pieces, and I wish Sarah Poirier was here because she could give you the medical term for it, but the two big pieces, as I read through the procedures and the changes that she had made to that, was similar to the isolation space in the school building. If we had a situation at one of our contests where a student became ill or began to start having symptoms, we've designated a spot to isolate those students and take the appropriate action to notify parents to come get them, and then obviously start the process of, the next steps in the COVID-19 response team. The second piece is early on, the sports medicine committee from both the federation and the state organization required us to start having portable AEDs on site. So those are the two big pieces that now, when our soccer coaches have been training at AMS, they bring the portable AED right with them. Luckily at Sherwood Heights, we have one in the building. The coach is a teacher there, so we have those in our plans. And while we're at the high school with football and the other soccer team, they know where those are. So those are the two big pieces, Pam, and I'm sure there are others that are medically above me that I don't understand.
Okay. And also the runners, we talked about cross-country, and will they be wearing masks? Because it's going to be hard to keep them 6 feet apart as well?
Right, so that was one of the concerns brought up by the commissioners yesterday, that, and that's part of the reason why we've seen all of these great road races and 5Ks and Beach to Beacon be canceled, is even if you have a staggered start, Mr. Anier's faster than me, so when he wants to run by me, right, I don't know this for a fact, but I think that's going to be one of the suggestions made, that maybe that you will have to wear a mask when you run. And I don't know that to be fact. I'm just speculating that the concern was they were going to go to the start line, take the mask off and put it in the trash can, and then go run. Even with a staggered start, that could be concerning.
As we tried to decipher this language and the meaning behind it, there was a lot of it was rooted in the start and the finish. So even with the staggered, those 5 or 6 kids would have a mask, but then it doesn't get clear on what that language looks like. Once they start getting spread out, it leads everyone to the assumption that, well, then you could have your mask off because you're hitting this guideline, this guideline, this guideline, but we don't know that specifically yet.
Okay. Yeah, because you're right. Once you start running, everybody is near each other, and you're not maintaining any space.
And one of the other points of emphasis with cross-country was the finish line as well, because they narrow it down so that you see everybody finish, and they come and they go through the corral, and it's really beneficial for the scorekeeper to know who's in the order. And they've taken some steps to widen that out and really get coaches on board that there will be no gathering at the end, because the kid that finishes first stands there and roots for the next 4 or 5 teammates to come across, and moms and dads are there with cowbells, and unfortunately that's not going to be able to happen. There's team tents need to be set up in an area, and when they finish the race, the kids will go to the team tent away from the finish line. 20 feet apart, I think the tents need to be.
Ryan Bellot?
Thank you.
Yeah, like Dave said, I mean, I appreciate the middle school sports, high school sports. I think it keeps the kids out of trouble, helps keeps their grades up. I still can't believe that we're allowing, fall sports, but we can't put kids back in school, but that's a separate issue. But what's the MPA guidelines on the mask? Because from what I've read, and maybe Pam, you can alleviate, once they become wet, they become, for lack of better words, useless. So if a cross-country runner is wearing a mask, running a 3.5-mile race, I'm pretty sure it's going to get wet. Volleyball, football players coming off, it's going to get wet. So what's their guidelines on, replacing masks during a race, after the race, all that kind of stuff?
I don't know that there's specific guidelines about the replacement of masks, but they did come out this week. What was very popular with a lot of our athletes was the neck gaiter, and many of those were thin. So they did come out today that it needs to be, that if you're going to wear the neck gaiter, many of our, football players felt more comfortable putting the neck gaiter on and then the helmet, that it needed to be 2-ply. But that's a great point. As when do they need to change it out? How many should they have with them? Each coach right now in their med kit, part of their COVID-19 med kit that our trainer put together, they do have disposable masks in there. Certainly not enough for every kid to change out, but that's something to think about for sure.
Just to kind of give some insight, and like Mr. Simpson asked, where's that point, and to hear some of these follow-ups, how the process works is, the MPA is a large governing body, and so you see the Mikes, we call them the Mikes, Mike Bissett and Mike Burnham. They're pulling information and making those statements that are compiled from a variety of subcommittees. And so when we get these documents that start talking about moderate and high risk and low risk, each one of those sports has a subcommittee. And so they're the ones that really dive in and take it apart and say, what is the meaning? And so like I said, what does that mean at the start and what does that mean during the race? That cross-country subcommittee is going to try to pull that apart. And that's a compilation of coaches, high school administrators, athletic directors, and they're going to try to find some meaning and create some language. And then they send that back through the sports medicine committee. Then it makes its way to interscholastic, and then it comes back to us so that we get a greater sense of guidelines of what that language is all about. And that happens in each one of the activities they do. So, where are we right now? Now we've just gotten these 2 documents, and so now what we're going to see, and probably happening in a pretty rapid fashion, is these subcommittees for this fall sports are going to start to take that and say, what does that mean? So we have these sets of language that tells us what we can do and what we can't do, but how does that apply in our sport-specific area? Because they tend to be global, and now we have to synthesize it down. And so we're going to start to see those committees moving very rapidly. So the conversation about how many people can be in a box, they're having those conversations, and that's where a lot of that guidance came from, as they feed it back up through some of those committees. And then it comes back to the larger school municipality for us to implement. So it kind of helps try to get there, because I can't answer that question, but I would look to our cross-country subcommittee to try to guide us with that language, and that will help inform where we are on a start date and how that decision will kind of filter its way out to communities.
Well, and I think you just helped me sort of understand, so they can push down. Can you also question up and say, we had these questions come up at our school board meeting tonight regarding this, this, and this. So you can contact your subcommittees and say, we need more clarification around this, this, and this.
And our coaches who funnel through Todd, who funnels it right into those subcommittees pretty rapidly.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Mr. Carrier?
Just a couple of questions, and mainly has to do with team size and stuff. My kids played sports all through school, and I played sports all through school. I understand the size of the football team, the soccer team, and things like that. And we've talked about the kids being in pods, but they will all end up playing together. What have the pod sizes been? What do you try to hold the pod sizes to?
So the recommendation from the MPA was no more than 10. And what most of our coaches have done is tried to be strategic and work around positioning. So for soccer, for instance, a lot of the defensive-minded kids have been in the same pod together. So as they're training skills, they're working on the defensive mindset of the game, and the other pod would be offense. More specific to football, I think our offensive line kids have been working together, our receivers, our backs, they've been spread out that way. The pods in cross-country, our coach has been strategic about working, trying to get a good grouping of, the number 1 runner and the number 5 runner, so that they're continuing to push each other and kind of developing that team chemistry piece.
Brian,
other questions?
to answer your question about the masks, I know that at work, if anything becomes soiled or if it becomes wet, we're supposed to take, get a new one. I do know that they make athletic masks. I know 'tis the times, but there are, like, I know Athleta, I know Nike and Adidas, they make certain masks that have like a mesh that can help with the wicking, the water wicking, so that might be something to look into for that. But I know when I was recently in Boston, everybody was wearing a mask. It was quite surreal, coming from Maine where we're outside and we don't wear masks. There, everybody was wearing a mask, and I saw people running the Charles, and they just had masks, and it was quite.
Good. Good. All right, any other questions for our two sports? Yes.
Not really questions, I don't think. I wanted, and Todd, you may know this already, but locally, the Lake Auburn Half Marathon is going to be run in a 5K, and they're doing it just by, different waves of runners. I think you may have misspoke. No one's ruled that soccer has to wear masks. The MPA certainly did not, right?
So soccer right now,
Right.
the understanding that I have is going to the event,
Right.
leaving the event.
But
during
competing
the
wise,
game.
Right.
because I was going to cite, and it's in my phone someplace, the MPA's report around football, and it was interesting to read, because when they totaled it down, where they basically said, well, the players are not near each other for 15 minutes during the entire game, which I think is a good standard, not necessarily for football, but I think for the other sports around mask wearing and the social distancing piece. I actually thought there was some good rationale behind that I hope can guide some of the other sports moving forward.
Yeah, to my knowledge, right now, girls volleyball being inside are going to be required to wear a mask while they participate. And right now, cross-country needs to wear it to the start line.
finish, yeah.
And sorry if I'm.
Lake Auburn's the first road race I'm aware of
Yes,
in Maine
I believe
this
so.
year. So.
I agree.
See you all there.
Yeah. Any other questions tonight for them?
Thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you for your
Thank you
support.
both very much for the update. Thank you.
Hey, Karen,
Yes, sir.
for Dr. Brown on the
Yep.
opening. If we're good.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. So, Dr. Brown, I'm wondering if you can kind of alleviate or help me with some clarity. So, and it has to do with the 2-3 cohorts. So, for instance, my girls, let's say, are on Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're doing their independent learning. And that same teacher is then going to teach the same lesson that they gave Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday to the other cohort that's going to be in school. I'm curious, I'm trying to think of how that's, it seems like a real disadvantage to the Thursday, Friday kids off the top of my head, because the lesson's going to be taught on Monday, Tuesday. How are the kids that are independent learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday going to get that lesson prior to? Like, I'm trying to think of the logistics of, I'm an AB, I'm an A cohort, I'm getting my lesson on Monday, Tuesday. Thursday, Friday kids are getting the same lesson, but on Thursday, Friday, but they're expected to do the independent learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So how are they going to do the independent learning without having gotten a lesson yet? And I'm just trying to figure out some of that clarity around that.
The remote plan, do you have the?
I don't have the remote plan here, but what would be really helpful is Shelley Mogul put together a schedule for both the 2-day and the 3-day kids.
Oh, is this it? Here, Brian.
That's it right there.
And we can share that with you. And so for the kids who are during the latter part of the week, the kids have a schedule and the kids have things to do. And so those things to do may include mental math, they may include, do you want me to wait, Michelle, until you pass this? Thank you. Yeah, where are you printing this? Oh, my word. Good thing I memorized this before.
But I can't.
Hey, Brian, thanks.
So, thank you. So glasses or no glasses, I'm not able to read this. But this will give you a schedule of what kids are going to do on the 2-day and on the 3-day. And I think really drills down into the more specific things that I've been asking for, because it was I think we needed better clarification on what exactly kids are going to be doing. And this schedule will be rolled out day one, Michelle, correct? This will begin, teachers have been working on this during the professional development days that we've been conducting with teachers, and this is teacher-driven. Even though Shelley collected it and put it together, this is really coming from our professionals.
Any other questions for Dr. Brown?
Yeah, one other question. So,
Absolutely.
and it goes back to the Pro AV equipment that we're putting in. So, once we start rolling this out, which I'm under this understanding based on last night and talking to Peter, that, you know, the classrooms are going to start getting the equipment here fairly soon. Are we in a position where those classrooms can now become 4-day versus the 2-day repeat? So, like, let's say we install it in a 4th grade classroom, and it's a 2-3, where the same lesson's being taught on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, Friday. Are we in a position, or do we have a plan to almost, rather than not instantly, but transition that into essentially a 4-day, not in school, but essentially the Monday, Tuesday, half the kids will be
4-day lesson
online,
plan.
half of them would be in class, but it's a 4-day learning versus the 2-day repeat?
Absolutely. I was at the middle school today, and Bob told me that every teacher at the middle school has asked for a Pro AV system, which I think is awesome. We're up to, where's Scott, 40-plus teachers at EL, maybe closer to 50 now? So it's catching on, because teachers see the benefit of taking work off their plate, and so they don't have to reteach, they don't have to do things twice. And for our families, they, as you have pointed out correctly, can be at home and not lose out at all. They're not in the classroom, but there's not going to be any loss of content or curriculum. And I'm just so pleased to see the way that is really taking hold now, and teachers seeing the value of that. I can't tell you how excited I was to have Bob say every teacher wants this in their classroom, like right now. We simply can't go fast enough for them to begin using the materials.
Because it will not be ready to roll out on September 14th. As much as we want the Pro AV system to be able to flick on September 14th, my understanding is that unfortunately we can't flip the switch on it in every classroom right away, correct?
Not in every classroom. We're doing 8 classrooms a day starting on the 8th.
Okay.
And we made EL a priority pursuant to the school committee's directive, and so that's who's getting it first. Now that I've learned that every teacher at AMS would like it as well, then we will move in that direction. But I've had staff from all the buildings reach out and say, this is something I really want in my classroom for that very reason that you've identified.
Great, awesome.
I have-
Any more questions for Dr. Brown? Yeah, Brian Carrier?
I'm overly thick. I'm from Oklahoma, forgive me. The Monday, Tuesday kids will get their lesson plans and stuff, and then they'll work on it Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, per se. The kids that are going Tuesday, Thursday will be working on the stuff from the week before, so they're actually just a couple of days behind.
I think it depends on how quickly and in what classrooms the Pro AV system goes in.
Oh, I'm just talking about just the immediate plan. I know that once we get the AV system running up, it's just going to be, it'll be one lesson plan for everybody, whether you're in class or not. We're just going to start on Monday, and it'll be that whole thing, no matter whether you're in class or not. But I'm just talking about this one specifically. Monday, Tuesday will work on the work, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whereas the kids that are Thursday, Friday will be working on the stuff from the week before until they get the new information.
I think the answer to your question is yes.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's sort of what I thought, but like I said, I'm a little thick. I just wanted to make sure I got that right.
What if a teacher doesn't want it? Can that,
Well,
will
the
there be any?
The system is a tool, and the system is part of your classroom, comparable to a whiteboard or a smartboard or an overhead projector. And you may not use to choose that tool that day, but it's still in your classroom. And so my expectation as a superintendent is these units are going into 300 classrooms. And I really trust the teachers to catch on to this. I think they're going to like it a lot. It's going to save them time and remove another barrier for them. So I think that once they have an opportunity to see how it works, and it's a pretty simple system, even I, the Luddite that I am with technology, can use it. I think that they will find that this is a great way to connect with their kids and their students. And they see it too, as you heard from Scott and the other administrators. This is really taking.
If they don't, though, will that child be able to move move out of the class? Switch classes?
That's a great question. I haven't had that one posed to me, so I'd have to explore that with the
Question asked to me,
administrators.
that's why. Yeah.
I don't know.
So if
I'll have to get
it's-
back to you with that.
So if a family would rather that their child is able to Pro AV in, and, okay, yeah.
Might be good
Great.
to determine that sooner rather than
Right.
when we're fully live, just have a process for families.
I would agree. Yeah.
So you said that if we're getting 8 a day, they're able to put 8 a day as of September 8th. So that's going to be like 37. So by the end of October, mid to end of October, we should have them all in by then.
That's right.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
that's what you reported last night as well to the city council. Faith?
So my concern with your response to that is, I was under the impression that was going to be the expectation of teachers are going to have to use this for remote learning, because I know as a parent, if my child gets a teacher that doesn't want to use it, and my kid and Brian's kids are able to follow class Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, I don't see that as being consistent or, fair or using it effectively. Because I would want my kid to have that option to be able to virtually be in the classroom 4 days a week. So I guess I'd like to see some clarification on how, if teachers are going to be mandated to use this, and if not, then I guess parents are, I can already foresee parents having a problem, because I've already had people ask, what if my kid's teacher doesn't want to use it, and that tool is there, but my kid has to sit at home and do independent learning?
So if I might take you back to the school committee discussion on July 28th, the committee consensus at that time was this would be a voluntary rollout of this technology, that it would go into classrooms, but that it would be voluntary. And unless the committee directs me to do something differently, as of July 28th, that was the information that I moved forward with.
Okay, I'll be the first one to say it, because what I intended by that is it's voluntary to start off with it so that we could provide them with a group of personnel that could answer questions in regard to it. I didn't just spend $2.1 million to have something sit on a wall and not get used. That's like, from my standpoint, it's just like a textbook. You're going to use it because it's been provided for you. I thought that the voluntary part was the people that wanted to start with it voluntarily to be sort of like we're going to dive into this, and we're going to be the leaders in this, and everybody else would follow along, and these people would be their, the go-to people. Peter can't be in every school, and I'm sure there's going to be questions, because as you said, there's people like me that I have trouble turning on the computer or breaking the printer. So, but yeah, I have a tremendous problem with it being, well, you can use it if you want. I didn't spend $2.1 million to be, this is a condition of employment. This is not a perk of an employment. We're going to use this tool.
So I think if I can jump in, I think every time we have the Pro AV conversation, and I thoroughly understand everyone's point, I think every time we're hearing about the Pro AV system, I mean, just to hear that the middle school, everyone at the middle school wants it. So I think it's gaining momentum, and I think that if we need to have that conversation regarding condition of employment, then I think it's something that we need to revisit it at some point, because you're right, we don't want some kiddos, it would create inequities amongst classes, and so I think it's really, let's get it going, let's start from there, it would be my suggestion, and there is a schedule in place, because right now, we're not going to have this in place, obviously, until the end of October, so let's start with the schedule that was presented here. Let's start with the rollout of the Pro AV, and let's sort of see if we need to come back to that conversation, would be my suggestion. Dave?
With all due respect, I would ask that we can ask the superintendent to direct teachers that they will use the system when it's available. I'm sure that they were consulted at some level that this was coming, and to Brian's point, I think my feet are on ground. We're going to have positive tests. We're going to go fully remote at some point. And if we have this technology and we don't use it, or if it's a choice, I mean, the quality of education will suffer. I mean, we'll say everybody's doing their best to make sure the kids are stimulated through, online 2 days learning. I'm not comfortable letting it hang out there. I think that we need direction tonight.
So I think that the teachers that I've talked to and the teachers that I have learned about will see the benefit and will realize what a valuable tool this is for them. And I think, as with any initiative, you have the early honors who want to grab it and move forward, and then you have people who wait and see. And then I think eventually, we have smart people working here in Auburn. They will realize this is a real time saver for them and what they can do with their kids with this system. And I think that will in itself build the momentum that Karen is talking about.
I'm not comfortable leaving it at that stage.
So that means if my child's in that class that doesn't start to use it, I can change the class, right?
Well,
I think they have that right, so.
You asked that question a few minutes ago, and
Yeah,
I
I'm
didn't
just-
know the
yeah,
answer to
yeah.
it then. It was the first time someone had suggested. I will certainly look into that.
Heard
And
that concern a lot, and
talk.
so that's a big concern.
And if
That
that becomes a case that seems to be happening, then definitely we need to look into.
Make sure you speak nice
We
and
need
loud.
to, sorry. If that's something that's happening a lot, then we need to look into maybe making sure, like you said, that all teachers use the system.
I agree with you, Dr. Brown. I think that once we get this started, that everybody will see the advantage to it. I mean, that's the reason that we went out and did this. This is a benefit. I mean, it's not, we didn't go out and buy, 5 or 10, new textbooks or something. We bought a system that would allow them to continue on and make it a continuum for these kids to have the education, regardless if it's a snow day, it's a sick day, whatever. It's a tool to use to make your life easier.
Yep.
So.
It's a wrestle. I mean, you're wrestling with something that we haven't seen in place yet. And so I think we have pictures of it in our mind right now. And it's probably a limited picture right now. I think teachers are in the same place. Karen, I remember you talking about kindergarten students. And you think about your littles and Pro AV, and you have a certain picture in your mind, whereas if you have a high school student in your mind, you get a different picture about Pro AV. So I think I feel your wrestle, because we're wrestling with some of that too. I wanted to put that out there, that there is still to see it across all grade levels, what exactly the expectation will be around that, so that it can be a benefit, not whether it will be used or not, because we do want to use that. And I do agree with what's been said about, once teachers see it, we watched it with whiteboards, we watched it with mounted projectors, people jumped in and used it because it made sense for their instruction. So just offer that.
So I think right now, at this point, it's pretty much the general consensus of this school committee, without having to make any motions or without having, it's the general feeling of the school committee that we want to see these used to their benefit and to the students' benefit as well. So at this point, this is just discussion. There's no motion on the table by any means, but I think the consensus is we would like to see it utilized.
Respectfully, I ask that the teachers are mandated to use these when they're available in their classroom, or identify tonight the barriers to doing that.
I am not sure.
If it's a contract issue, let's figure this out before it's too, because we're only hearing from the ones that want it. I'm sure there's a cohort out there that feel this is being done to them.
Mm-hmm. So, Dr. Brown, I would defer to you right now as far as what can be mandated with this, what cannot be mandated with this.
So my understanding is, from the school committee's actions on the 28th, we purchased 300 units, and that those units will go into classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody with me so far? Mm-hmm. And that the understanding further is that because of the technology, not everybody can have it on September 14th, correct? So stop me when I'm wrong. So further, that EL was the priority, and that we would put as many units into EL as we could possibly establish, and that we would work to provide anyone who asked one from there. And I'm just, in terms of timeline. So as I roll this out in my head, I look at EL as a priority in its classrooms, all of the middle schools and its classrooms. Everybody, the beauty of these systems is that you don't have to do it by building. They're independent. And so I can go out and put in 10 at East Auburn, and I can put 10 in at Washburn on the same day. So we're going to continue to roll them out. And the assumption, my assumption, is that teachers will see the value of these as a tool in their classrooms. I see it happening now. If I ask Scott, a month ago, how many people had asked for this system, it was half that. Very few people at the middle school. So it is catching on, and the expectation is this is a tool, and we do expect people to use it. But I can't expect everybody to use it, as Pam has correctly pointed out, in September, because I won't have the technology available. But by November-ish, everybody should have it, and they should have a clear understanding of how to use it, and the expectation is that people will use the tools that have been provided to them.
So I think at this point, Dave, I hear you, that you want a decision tonight.
I struggle with saying when it's available, it will be utilized. There's no maybe, or they're going to catch on and they're going to. I mean, I appreciate Scott a few weeks ago. He said, yeah, that's his expectation. All the teachers at EL will use this. What is the barrier to saying that tonight? I just don't. And I live in my own world, I guess. But it's like, to your point, there's a lot of money put in this, and to say now it's a tool, an optional tool, I don't understand that.
Well, we come from, and I'll speak for Dave, we've come from a world where things are finite. I worked in the police departments, I worked in the military. It was never a question. This is, I provided you a tool, you will use it. And I think that's the way it is with the corrections and everything else. It's just, we're not used to asking. I didn't ask my employees at the Postal Service. I put the rule out there, we're going to abide by it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just the way that it is. And I think we're looking for that kind of concrete, message to go out. It's a tool, and the expectation is that you're going to use it. If it breaks down or something, that's our problem, but it's a tool that you will use. And, I think that's the problem. It seems like we're,
So, go
I was
ahead,
just gonna
Dr.
say, I
Brown.
think it's entirely reasonable to ask me as a superintendent for a status report in probably October to find out how many units are in and how they're being used.
Well, I was just about to say, I'm looking at that as a future agenda item, that the ProAV system is on here for an update, and I would think that it would behoove the school committee to also ask the superintendent to make sure that before anything is mandated, that we are working with the association, so that we are moving along and avoiding some conflict between the school committee and the school and the Auburn Education Association. That is really what I'm also thinking about too. What can we sit here and mandate, and how do we work together to roll these out?
So that's the barrier. I mean, did you just identify what the barrier to?
I'm not saying that's the barrier. I'm basically saying I want to make sure that we move ahead in a positive, proactive way, and make sure that we are utilizing these very expensive systems in a way that we're reaching a common understanding. And I understand it's not the answer you want, but I want to take positive, proactive steps forward. I would really like to avoid 200 people standing outside with red shirts again. And I'm not saying that because I'm not afraid to make a decision. It's not that I'm afraid to make a decision, but I think that there are steps that we need to take in the right direction. This is not something that I don't want to see the system sit on the wall and do nothing. And it's not ready until October anyways. So I think it would behoove us to add it and to allow you to have conversations with admin and with teachers coming forward with wanting to use this, and to give us an update. And if we need to make an agenda item that absolutely fits into how ProAV is expected to be used in the Auburn school system, then that's what we need to do. because it's an expectation of mine also, that my son on Thursday can log into his class. I thoroughly want him to be able to do that as well, while he's home on remote. So if we could add that as so skipped ahead a little bit there on a future agenda item.
Will do.
Okay, all right, thank you, everyone. Moving on, school committee chairperson's report's going to be pretty quick because most of it has to do with the city council update. So we just want to express our gratitude to the, as many of you know, the mayor invited Dr. Brown and myself last night to a city council meeting where we met with city manager and the city council for the opportunity to meet and collaborate on the subject of the school reopening plan. So in response to the hybrid model that the school committee voted on and the school department is presenting to the state for approval, the city's coordinating efforts and resources for families to access during remote learning days. So Councilor Carrier will probably elaborate a little bit more on those efforts that the city is making to support our families at this time. So Councilor Carrier, I'm going to carry it over to you, please.
Well, as you said last night, the informational workshop that we had was just looking for the ways for the city council to be able to assist the school department in any of our opening and other type problems that we have. The city manager had touched on a lot of areas in charge, dealing with rec programs, child care, and things like that. And we had several discussions, and we will continue to have the discussions into next week in regards to what the city can do to help the school board and the schools open and be able to operate successfully. We did find out that the city does not have sufficient number of buildings at this point. We did find out that there are roughly 400 slots that are possibility out there for after school, or not after school, but daycare and recreational items. I know that that's going to be continuing. We're looking at what we can do as far as that go. And I know it's going to be part of our discussion next Tuesday night. So we're just going to continue on working in that area.
Thank you. I will say it was a great opportunity to be able to, and I would think Dr. Brown would agree with me, it was a great opportunity to be able to see collaboration between the school committee and city council. So we thank them all for that. All right, committee reports. Moving on to committee reports. Our finance subcommittee, anything to report out this evening?
We meet next week.
Okay, and policy subcommittee, I think we're going to be addressing some of that this evening. Any other updates other than some of the updates we've had? None? All right. Looking at all the subcommittees below, anyone have anything to report on any of these? Okay, seeing none. All right, let's moving on to new business. So we've had our policies before us, so at this point, can I entertain a motion to move to approve policy CB, the school superintendent, for a first reading?
So moved.
Second? Need time to find policy CB? Great, thank you, Mr. Belknap.
I think you did it.
Oh, did you? I'm so sorry.
I was like, wait a second again.
Two, Karen, two. All right, everyone, all those in favor? Seeing none opposed, that policy passes. Next policy, job description of the superintendent. A motion to approve procedures CB-R job description for adoption.
So moved.
Thank you, Pam. Have a second. Thank you, Mr. Belknap. All those in favor? Motion passes. Next policy, CBI, the evaluation of the superintendent. A motion to approve policy CBI, the evaluation of the superintendent for a first meeting. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Pam, second.
Second.
Thank you, Dan Poisson. All those in favor? And motion passes. Policy CBI-RI, evaluation of the superintendent procedures. Motion to approve policy CBI-RI. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Mr. Belknap. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pam. All those in favor? Motion passes, none approved. Upcoming meetings, September 16th at 7 p.m. We have an executive session at 6 p.m. for the evaluation of the superintendent. At this time, we are going to be moving into, future agenda items. We have the Pro AV system
Yep, the
on
Pro
there.
AV.
Any other?
Yeah, on the 16th, we need to add to approve the nutrition contract,
Okay,
which we're going to discuss the results of that in executive session in a minute.
okay. Any other requests for information or future agenda items?
Are we going to go, is there going to be a presentation that day about the reentry a little bit more clearly as far as like a day in the life, kind of with the remote aspect of, I know we got something about the remote, but is there going to be more information at that point that we can kind of,
I missed the first part of what you said. Did you have a date in mind for
yeah,
that?
the 16th, I thought.
16th
maybe-
of September?
Yes, will you have more information as far as what, like, a day in the life of a remote learner so that we can have a little more clarification on what that's going to look like?
I will,
In addition, so I'm sorry, Dr. Brown, so you mean separate from what you have right here, where it says I'm a full remote student and what my day looks like? So this is sort of,
Yes.
in my mind, this kind of looks like a day in the
Because I
life.
can't see it and I can't read it, I'm not quite sure. So maybe if I just get a larger version, like an old lady version of this, then that'll be enough.
What I would say, Pam, is after reading this, if you're not comfortable with this, then contact Dr. Brown and we could move forward from there. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. All right, at this time, I need to entertain a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 405D for the purpose of negotiations between public employer and public employees.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carrier. Thank you, Mr. Belknap. All those in favor to enter executive session? Excellent, motion passes. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in executive session, so can I ask those who can no longer stay with us in executive session? Peace out, people.
I know. Can we go?